Merhabalar, hoş geldiniz. Cezayir ailesi olarak bugün Açık Diyalog İstanbul ve Nuova Icona'nın Art of Change Strategies for Cultural Survival paneline ev sahipliği yapıyoruz. Bu proje aynı zamanda 15. İstanbul Bienniali komşu etkinlikleri programında yer almaktadır. Hello, welcome. As Cezayir family, we are more than happy to host the panel. Art of Change Strategies for Cultural Survival, created and organized by Open Dialogue Istanbul and Nuova Icona. This project is the part of 15th Istanbul Biennial. Now, I leave the word to Ms. Billur Tansel, founder of Open Dialogue Istanbul.
Hi everyone, welcome. We as Open Dialogue Istanbul and Nuova Icona are delighted to welcome you to our panel, Art of Change Strategies of Cultural Survival, as Cem Bey kindly said. We're grateful to Mr. Osman Kavala and the Cezayir team for hosting us here at Cezayir for this event. This project is realized, as also Cem Bey said, as a part of the 15th Istanbul Biennial, its neighboring events program. I would like to shortly present our moderator and speakers. The moderator, Vittorio Urbani, is the founder and director of Nuova Icona. It's a non-profit institution for the arts. He's an independent curator based in Venice. Of course, this is too short an explanation for all the things they have all accomplished. The panelists are Ayse Erek. She's a researcher, a writer specializing in contemporary art. She's an associate professor of art history at Yeditepe University. Beral Madra is a critic and curator. She's the curator of Biennial and was the artistic director of Quad Gallery. Mehmet Kütükçüoglu is an architect and founding partner of Curated Architecture, also a lecturer and a member of the board of directors of Billur University, master's degree in architecture. After this brief introduction, I would like to give the word to Vittorio for the panel.
Thank you for the introduction. Can you hear me well? No? Yes?
Is it okay?
There is a red light.
Yes.
Try with this.
Try
Hello? See, this works. Thank you, Billur, for your words. This panel has been the fruit of a long discussion among us. We are people of different background, all of us interested in culture, and the spirit of this morning, I hope, will be to discuss what we can do to help so-called cultural survival, which means in time of wars, in time of massive migrations, and in time of financial difficulties in many, also in formerly rich Western countries. Of course, culture is at a threat, not only in terms of material production, so of course less money means less money for the artist, but also regarding the issues that are behind art, problems, themes, political ideas which are discussed within a good artwork. We are used to consider antique art as just beautiful, but I mean, any Raffaello painting was also a political manifesto, even if for us this is difficult to understand. So I want, as introduction, to point a few points that I may help my colleagues to go back to, if of course they are interested in discussing, which can be, in our experience, there are collaboration with biennials, both in Venice and in Istanbul. How much of the Biennale is true to his job to promote culture and promote an international platform, and how much of the Biennale can be considered independent. Plus, it is dear to me the theme of economic relationship within the art world. I mean, galleries, curators, artists, museums, art fairs. There is a very dark situation, nothing is clear, rules are not written, if not in some countries, in Germany, in Canada. Galleries have big forms to fill with the artist, declaring the right of the artist, but in Italy these don't exist and possibly not exist in Turkey as well. So clear economic relationships are also at the base, not only of artist survival, but also of an honest deal. And without honesty, let me say, there is no culture, or not a real uncorrupted one. And finally, in the second part of the title of this panel, what we can do, I mean, what we can do. The artist alone cannot save himself. Art fair is, of course, a commercial place, so I will not look for independent cultural production in art fair. Biennales may show problems which we are maybe going to discuss. And so we are left probably with the independently run art spaces, run by some person with a vision or group of young artists, which of course are very weak in terms of possibility of production, of finances. So the independent art space, funnily or tragically, is the weaker ring of the chain. Ecco, these are the themes I hope to see discussed, and I may give word to Beral Madra to start present your considerations. You may have some 10-15 minutes of talk,
Okay.
and then we want also to be open to your objections and additions. Thank you.
I was counting how many Biennale I had curated since now. It is 15, the number. So, thank you for giving me
Too
the
many.
word. First, it's too many, yes. But still, I'm not used to it. I think, first of all, I would like to thank Open Dialogue and Nuova Icona to organize this very crucial meeting, and I'd like to thank the public that they left all the Biennale, beautiful Biennale exhibitions, and you are with us. Thank you for coming here. I think under this title we are going to make an analytical critique of today's art industry. We know that the Biennale are basically a major every 2-year display of produced artworks. So the main creator is the artist. We are talking about an industry in which the artist, gallery, collector, curator, institutions, market, communicates, collaborates, and benefits. I think this became a very complicated partnership. And most of the recent critical texts are dealing with this collaboration or partnership, which somehow claims or argues that there are no borders of ethical, conceptual, political, social concerns left between the sides of this so-called collaboration and partnership. So, global Biennale are in the center of this hot debate. There are two main questions asked in these critical texts, which I have been reading since 8 months, since Documenta was opened. One of the main questions is who decides about the concept and the artist list. It is acknowledged that these are called super curators. These are curators, independent or affiliated to an institution, whose intellectual interests and selections of artists are tremendously influential. These curators are super. not only because they curate shows that have a significant concept, high aesthetics, important artists, and attractive for the public, but because they have a strong network and good relations which support their quest for success. The second question is, in this critical text, what is the relation between curators, galleries, dealers, collectors, and official institutions? Postmodern and neo-capitalist developments and systems have influenced the ethical positions and behaviors in the art system, so that the borders between the producer of the work, who is the artist, and the consumers are blurred and became penetrable. The main buyers of the artwork are collectors, corporations, or official institutions. Many collectors are as famous as the artists. They collect, and when they build their collections, they open private museums as a showcase for their investment. The artists these collectors have chosen became famous, and critics are not reluctant to justify and contextualize their fame. So it seems, through these two questions, it seems that the Biennale are an effective tool within this complex structure. Whoever can use this tool effectively will benefit financially or in other ways. Shall I go on? Over the last 50 years, Biennale have outgrown their traditional roles and absorbed a whole variety of benefits to fit today's expanded art world. They might be independent Biennale or official Biennale, whatever they are. They are expected to be groundbreaking, historicizing, enriching local scenes. Local scenes, it can be the city, or it can be a region, or it can be globally important, like Venice and Documenta. I think the Biennale will continue to be the force that connects the artist, art, and the public. So, what should be changed?
Ayse, Erek, to give your opinions.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting Billur and Vittorio. I want to in fact shift the question a little bit from the Biennales only, and I hope to, in relation to that, discuss it in terms of the public space and Istanbul a little bit, because as we have also discussed 2 days ago in another panel, any Biennale is working in a specific urban context and with different problems and so on. Maybe since now we are in Istanbul, we could also think in terms of the main changes and transformation in Istanbul in the last 2 decades and try to find the solution for the survival also in relation to the disappearance of the public space or the questions rising in relation to the urban sphere, which also might connect to architecture as well. I think in the recent discussions on Istanbul, one of our main problems also very much appearing in the discussions in Biennale since at least since 2005 is the urban public sphere, which has been discussed. We've been discussing since 1970s by major social writers and thinkers in general. And if there is a disappearing of a public space, then in fact the public life also disappears. So our Biennales, the recent Biennales, made this a very important phenomena. In 2013, if you remember, Fulya Erdemci's Biennale was about the public space, and in 2005 the Biennale the title was Istanbul, and in the previous Biennales also the urban context was mainly a major issue since we are under a huge change in terms of our urban environment. Since 1990s, Istanbul is taking more place in the global arena, first as a financial center, and starting the beginning of 2000s, also decided by the local municipality and the state, Istanbul is at least planned as a cultural center in the region. So this had a lot of consequences. For this talk, I also would expect that we would discuss about the institutions, galleries, the art industry. I wanted to look to another aspect, to the do-it-yourself initiatives in the city, which also very much taken part in the public sphere since 2005. The independent spheres of artist initiatives and so on. Because when we started to talk about the city more and more, there is also a rise in the number of the artist initiatives in 2004, 2006, which also became a part of the discussion about art industry. Their claim was to stay independent, and I remember in 2009 I was a part of a platform discussing about the artist initiatives and the question how independent they could be or how alternative they could be. Because they had no financial support, they were mostly do-it-yourself initiatives by voluntary work and so on. And as we know, in Istanbul, in Turkey, there is almost no state funding for the artists. It's more or less all private funding. And in 2005, 6, 2000s, there was also no funding for the artist initiatives. So basically, they were about community making, sharing, and creating a space on their own. They used mostly the temporary spaces of the city at that time for short periods of time, as much as they can do, or they consciously preferred to use the temporary space in the city to make their concerns visible to the wider public. And since we are now doing the introduction, and when we come to 2010s, we are discussing the urban sphere in a much different way than 2005s, which already we started, but we see the rising commercialization and the privatization. And if you only look at Beral, we can see, in fact, that it's more and more becoming more and more privatized in terms of not only the private money, but in terms of access to the public sphere. And I guess one of the main issues of discussing cultural survival is also relating very much if the public sphere or public life will stay at all, or what makes it continue in terms of creating community and so on. And so in 2007 I was also a part of a survey about artist initiatives, what were the main problems and what we were discussing, and what were the main issues they were talking about. For this talk I also made I went back and I just read what we had written that time as a little report, and at that time they were talking a lot about creating an alternative sphere for the artists who were staying outside of the gallery system and the Biennial system, and who were also very much critical about the financial resources, because they were skeptical about the content of their work being very much affected by those kind of resources. And then I made a little research what was happening, and I made a little list, and I saw that in fact out of almost 15, only 3 of them are state as artist initiatives for today, 3 or 4 of them, because there was a popping up of the artist initiatives in 2004 and 2005, and in fact the earliest one, apartment project in 1999, which still remains, but not in Istanbul, in Berlin, it changes place. But I found out that only 3 or 4 of them are still existing. And I also find out that there's an increase in the number of a second wave of artist initiatives in 2010 and 2011, a second wave, most of them new ones, newly founded ones, again bringing up the questions, the problems of staying independent in the society, but with a more emphasis on also the public space and public sphere. We now have, I guess, maybe around 15 artist initiators and a new fund, a new private fund by Saha since 2014, who's a combination of private sector, which is also giving big support for contemporary art exhibitions and also some support for researchers, writers, and also a new fund about that appeared in 2014 to the artists, so-called independent artist initiators. And most of the artist initiators now they had the chance to receive some funding from Saha. I think this is one of the reasons that maybe they can remain, but we can discuss about this. But I don't put it as a problem, just a fact, but we can discuss it later. But again, the temporary uses of urban sphere, the collaboration, the do-it-yourself kind of philosophy in most of them, and sharing, and also a claim to be maybe critical towards the art industry are a point that they bring to my mind when we talk about these initiatives. And again, I also observe that a lot of things that we discuss now through Biennales and through the artist initiatives and through our writings is very much relating to the situation in Istanbul, which is a threat upon the public space and the public life. So maybe I can stop here and then we can continue.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you. I will also open up maybe a different channel than we converge. Now Mrs. Madra talked about a type of food chain composed of collectors, critics, curators, artists, probably artists being the last ring in the food chain. I'm an architect, so we have been living in a similar food chain for centuries by now, because it's also a service and for a very expensive object. That's why my observation is art has proven to be until recently more adaptive to changes than architecture. Architect is still a tragic, archaic character now, wanting to be something but being something else. We always live this dilemma, and artists until recently has escaped this dilemma. We want to be, let's say, timeless, but at the same time, become fashionable. Sometimes we want to be local, but then we cannot escape global or vice versa. All these things. And but artists have done it. I'm making it vulgar. Might not be true, for all the cases, but artists have done it for the cost of almost losing their forms and ways of doing things, even the object of it. I've been strolling through the net, coming across certain concepts, and there is one concept, ambient image, as opposed to the image that is produced by the artist, specific image, kind of heroic, skillful, crafted, and has a specific message. From that, now the image has become an ambient image. image, where you know, at the first glance you don't even understand whether it's artwork or not, and it's disseminated throughout the world, multiplied. So with this ambient image, this message is not specific anymore, and the object of the image is not specific anymore. It's ambient, and it's happening with this globalization. It works twofold. One is the hyper-visibility of the artwork and the artist, but then, again, also infinite expansion of dark matter, which means, you know, there are probably millions of artistic production and artists unknown somewhere in the world, producing many things with their own, let's say, not acclaimed, not too much supported, a dark matter waiting for us. So all of a sudden it becomes, with the ambient image and the dark matter, important to the necessity to have some kind of an interpretation, critique of this. So the artwork must come with a reflection, otherwise it's not complete. And this critique has been before, like, let's say, a critique kind of detached from the artist, telling what is true or false to other people, because the scientists, the academics never, they would reject that artists are revealing truths or creating truth. They are creating new worlds or imagination, and the critique is extracting the truth and representing it. Well, it's not that type of critique anymore with the ambient image. It has to be a critique, not judging, but rather kind of an extension of the artistic activity, like opening up spaces, new spaces, fresh space, using the art between virtual and actual world. Kind of a poetic writing, this critique. So it's not, I'm not putting it in the food chain of this, let's say, equation. But I said until recently, because now I observe, again I'm putting it very crude and vulgar, now I observe that the artists, many of the work, are abusing political and social consciousness. It's now almost inevitable to be recognized. To be recognized, you have to deal with some political and social consciousness. But before, I feel like the artist and the work was itself political, as you mentioned, Raphael, or later. It was a political act itself. It even transformed politics or philosophy. But now, I feel like it's a subject matter for the artist, kind of a side dish for a kind of recognition. And that's a sign, because I feel like until recently, recently artists even have some difficulty to cope with this Facebook, Twitter revolution, Web 2, where you don't create content. Public participation creates content. You just create an environment. So it almost means like now everyone is creative, not the artist. That's kind of the end of the aura. I mean, Walter Benjamin said it, I have not much to add in almost 100 years ago. So it's not mechanical reproduction now, but it's another kind of reproduction and dissemination, where, you know, even the aura of the artist is at stake. So here I feel like now it's face to face with public participation. Now artists are trying to explore, and collective authorship, collaboration, and the urban environments, kind of create your own kind of milieu to disseminate by using this. So it's kind of a new type of way of doing things. I mean, it's not the old times of artist's subjective imagination and his or her own creation of new worlds, but kind of a participated, shared kind of creation of, rethinking of creation of new worlds. I think that's a question and maybe a possibility for the artist.
I would like to make a couple of comments after your opinions. And one is that Biennale are basically a big machine for money. There are large production, large sponsorship, money given by the state, at least to the Venice Biennale. I don't know so much about the funding of Istanbul Biennial. And the Biennale struggle rather easily, because they are of course important, to be the institution which grant what is good or not. I mean, any artist which shows in the Biennale can convince collectors, can put it in the first places of his CDs. But this is a pretension of the Biennale, because since 1895, when the Venice Biennale started, there has been a growth of the power of the Biennale, and only after the Second World War, the spread of, I think, more than 200 Biennales phenomena in the world. And now it is given for granted that if something is in a Biennale, any Biennale, this must be good. On the opposite, the private sector in Turkey, as far as I see, has a bigger role, which could be a strategy of freedom, given some political difficulties of the moment. In Italy is much less the private intervention in art. We still have many state-run museums. But of course the ambiguity of culture sponsored by rich holdings is that rich holdings maybe cannot afford to be really independent from the authority of policy, of politics. So there is something which kind of creates a contrast. As Ayse, you mentioned the Sapa. In fact, I didn't know they are thinking to sponsor young artists run initiative. I think this is very good.
Only when they make exhibitions in abroad or in a Biennale or in a significant exhibition in the international world.
Not as initiative itself.
Difficult.
The initiative itself, in fact, the initiative itself.
Because this would be good if they
not only the ones who exhibited really, but the initiatives who have a space and who are independent, but who are independent from any gallery system or who define themselves as initiatives. but they already started, in fact they were thinking in 2014, so at the moment it's really quiet, but yeah, we can talk about it.
See, this seems to be a really good thing if they can follow this, because again the traditional assistant of the artist has been the collector, and this is truly since antique times. Rich people in Antwerp would buy Rubens and so on until the recent time. Some 10 years ago I had the chance to create an exhibition at the old Elgis Museum when it was close to Canyon in Levant, and it was a group show of Italian contemporary art, which I did following the interest of the Elgis Museum in promoting collecting in Turkey. So I just looked at the artists which were interesting and had the possibility to have a collector as patron of their participation. Because of course, you know, as usual, the budget is a problem, blah blah. So I asked, say one name, Antonio Riello, collector, can you pay, say, 3-4 days in an hotel for the artist, the return flight and the transport of the artwork? In a case, one of these collectors even produced the artwork, maybe with your help, Murat, in Istanbul, which was nice. So the collector was patron of a new creation of art made by the Italian artist here and for here. This was a simple model, but I don't go on telling you the difficulties of this, just to tell one. So we could do also, the collectors gave also some money to produce a catalog. So the poor collectors had to pay not a little money, but most did with a great enthusiasm. I remember an important Italian collector, which actually is dead last year, so I will not tell the name, which told me, Dr. Urbani, why should I pay when museums pay me first-class flight to go to the opening of their exhibition in which my works are given on loan at their expenses? And really I would have thrown something on him, but on the telephone you cannot. I said, because you can be generous. So imagine, the answer would be generosity. Perhaps we should use again old words: honesty, generosity, gratuity. Gratuity, an art of production.
Traditional ethics.
Ottoman ethics. And I mean, see, I really was very upset, and I told him, you can be generous or not. In fact, he didn't. He had a problem with his wife health. I don't remember what was, and I did not call him again. But some 12 other people actually did that, and some became eventually even friends because it was a well done and well shared initiative. So it's not enough that a collector buy an artwork, because I also am a bit critical on this patronship. Because at the end, when you buy, imagine that this is an artwork, many contemporary artwork looks like this, so I am not insulting nobody. And you buy that, you put in your house, and you are helping the artist's career. Yes or not? Because you are buying goods that you eventually, as many collectors do, can resell later with a big profit, which is not shared usually, if not in certain countries, with the artist. So, I mean, if you, for your house, buy chairs, you will not pretend to be a sustainer of the industry of chair makings. No, because you buy just chairs which you use and do whatever you like. So collectors should be more modest in their pretense. I, in a way, vote for the interesting phenomena of Turkey for collectors opening museums. Because at the end they could buy 2 more villas in Switzerland on the French Riviera, and they are doing an act of generosity. even if it is their collection, even if they invited to the opening their rich looking friends, eventually any boy from the street can come for free. This is very nice, I appreciate. And in this sense I will forgive something that at the end again is their own property, like they are promoting some artists sometimes of dubious cultural quality, but again this is a phenomenon which requires generations to become sophisticated. Probably even the Collezione Borghese in Rome was built over centuries as we see it now, so it's such a perfect gem of Italian culture. When we met years ago with Beral Madra in Rome, I wanted to show her one thing. We didn't go in a contemporary art museum, but I wanted to visit the Collezione Borghese, because when you are there you understand the Italian taste. But this is made after generations, so this private museum in Turkey require 200 years to make themselves more sophisticated and eventually important. But even for the moment being, I think is an important phenomenon, even with the ambiguity again of the rich families that have to deal for their own financial assets with the government. So it is a good phenomenon. Probably it will be easier to create a censorship in public museums. Do you want to say something?
Yes, because some issues are mentioned. One of them was, Ayse was saying, was focusing on Istanbul in terms of Biennial, etc. I think Istanbul has a special character in many other, compared to many other Biennial, because from the beginning, Istanbul was actually the main subject of all the Biennial. Until now, the curators, I don't know why, but they focus on Istanbul. Maybe they use different titles, but when they come to Istanbul, Istanbul becomes their main subject, or it is the attraction of the city maybe. And for example, the first two Biennale was openly focusing on the city, using the historical buildings, etc. And this didn't change. Actually, there is a deficit in the culture industry of Istanbul, that the Biennale has no permanent venue in the city. Even if we have many post-industrial areas, since 20 years there are many post-industrial areas in the city, and some of them belong to private sector, but some of them belong to the state or whatever. So why did Biennale not get a venue like in Venice or in other cities? This must be discussed, I think. And you mentioned the artist initiatives. I think this is the basic production of this city. You are right. Without these artist initiatives, without this production, but it started in end of 70s with art definition group, Serhat Kiraz and Ahmet Ektem and Şükrü Aysan. They have founded this kind of artist initiative, and they were active until 1988. So it's a long period. And then Hafriyat, for example. These are the earliest initiatives. And in 2010, with the huge financial support of this government, we could make a fair, like art fair for initiatives. And we invited 40 initiatives from the neighboring countries. So, I mean, why I am mentioning with the money of this government? Because at that time, Turkey was supposed to be integrated to European Union, and Istanbul 2010 Culture Capital was a tool, was a showcase for this integration. So there was a lot of investment. And I think also the collectors' museums and all other investing infrastructures had also some kind of essential idea from 2010 projects. And also I would like to mention that, what we have, the most important problem is the sustainability of these basic productions in the city now. We are really experiencing a transformation. Why? Because the constructions in the city influences the movement of cultural venues. So, for example, now we can say that some of the galleries moved to Karaköy because it is a more quiet and more maybe safe area. And in Beyoğlu now there are no galleries left, almost no galleries left, just some. So we hope that after this horrible construction, they will come back or other galleries will be open. But the scale of this year's Istanbul Biennale is, of course, smaller than the ones before because of the venue problem, because of probably we don't know the financial issue, but it was designed more or less, I should say, a modest Biennale, because there are only 4 or 5 venues where you can see the artists all together. So, shall I talk a little bit about what should be done?
Yes.
Yeah. Biennale structure cannot be the same in, it should not be the same, the structure, because every city, every region has its own character, its own production power, or its own geopolitical situation. So the curators must be very flexible, and they should really intensely get involved in the socio-political atmosphere of the city or the region where they are commissioned to do a biennale. For example, this may not be the case for Venice Biennale because it's a really global biennale, and it has also this basic nation pavilion structure. But for the Biennale in countries where there are less democracies, semi-democracies, deficit democracies, it is really difficult to organize or to curate a Biennale. And I think the Biennale should have official financing, at least up to 40%. Without official financing of the Biennale cannot serve the public as well as a Biennale with official investment in it. Unfortunately, Istanbul Biennale is only sponsor-based and only private sector sponsored Biennale. And I think the Biennale should not only depend on star curators. Behind the star curator, there should be a strong team. I mean, it is preferred that the team should be also local, so that the foreign curator who comes to a city of 15 million can not define what is going on in this city and how I should approach the public. So it will be helpful to have a strong local team. And Biennale, I think, should give opportunity to local art scene to participate.
Fine Arts faculty, which was very dominant in art production until the 1950s. And maybe even before the Independent Painters Association of the early Republican period and so on. But again, coming after the 1990s and 2000s, I think still this situation of Istanbul becoming a global city, I think maybe what also made the Biennales focusing on Istanbul. I don't know what you think as a curator of the Biennales, this specific focus. So the Biennale is also working for the city to make it more global, maybe not. After 1990s,
no, at the beginning, yes, because I mean, in the 80s, Istanbul was not so visible in the
after 90s,
it was.
But this affects, of course, when you talk about making the city global, then you talk through the spaces of the city. Maybe that was why the globalizing Istanbul after 1990s also become a part of its urban spaces, and which is constantly under great change and so on. So it brings the issue of art and cultural survival and the public sphere and becoming global, all tied to each other. And in terms of sustainability and that you mentioned the collections and the funding and the private finance, but I'm also still trying to think of these actors who are a bit outside of this big collectors system. For example, as I tried to talk about artist initiatives after 1990s and 2000s, maybe now we can see a kind of third wave even, which is finding its expression in neighborhood associations, in urban garden projects, which you cannot see the borders anymore, if it's about art or architecture, but or creating community and public, these kind of borders, they are disappearing when it comes to talk about the public sphere, which I also find a lot of interesting discussions there, because it makes a lot of conflicts visible, like the recent ones, for example, the urban interventions about the Roman gardens in Cihangir or the Yedikule urban gardening, which also succeeded in involving the local people, especially, for example, in terms of the Yedikule Bostanları, the Yedikule Garden Initiative, which is founded in 2013. It ended up by founding an association of the actual gardeners who were living there, and in their rights, in their claims to claim the space of their own. So, as you also mentioned, more and more it's becoming, the focus is becoming in some parts on collaboration and creating different actors, which I find very interesting, this kind of different groups becoming together.
Maybe people didn't see it yet, but for example, now there is a public space exhibition in Haydarpaşa train station. So it is really a public space. I mean, everybody can enter, and it is.
This they are claiming for it to remain as a public space, and you can see that there are many artistic strategies. You can call them art or not, but artistic strategies, creativity, also researchers and people coming together to discuss common issues about the urban sphere, which is a space outside, not outside, maybe related to the biennales and the gallery system and so on. since 2013, this is increasing in the micro level, and it also, I think, opens a lot of questions for us, which is a combination of different disciplines and different people, also the local people, the gardeners in but there might be a lot of conflicts also there, but I think any discussion about biennales and art production is also very much related to this bigger sphere, I think. Yeah, that's my little comment.
Mehmet, I have a question for you. Of course, the position of architects is not easy, but clear. The commitment, the finance, and so you make your project more complex is the economic relationship in the field of visual art. But how do you see the thing, and what would be your suggestion to artists in terms of survival?
Yeah. Well, in that sense, I don't really detest architects' position of dependency. I mean, of course, it creates a lot of difficulty. But at the same time, it's a service, it's part of life and commercial life. And there's a lot of contamination, which is good. And what you do through that, I mean, think of it, I mean, I'm thinking of many rock bands producing their most energetic music in the emergence, where they were coming through life, trying to grab some kind of, let's say, recognition. Probably they had to do a lot of, I mean, they were contaminated. They had a lot of, let's say, they had to convince a lot of people to get that and to survive. But once they get recognition, many of them lost their initial energy. So contamination is not bad. I mean, I would even sometimes, you know, now sometimes I feel like the artists are considered as precious species on the brink of extinction, and we have to carefully and sensitively protect them and understand them. That's not nice. I mean, even as an architect, once we get more recognition, sometimes some people come and expect you to create some whatever you want to do, kind of a statement, and that's not nice for us. So I would say, you know, that's well, artists are in that position. It's as I said, there is a growing number of production as a black matter, and they are in that position. That's important, but I don't think it's a problem. On the other hand, I want to comment on some things. For example, Ms. Madra said, well, we don't have a venue for the Biennial. I like that. And it's also connected to the specific situation of Istanbul. I wouldn't say now it's globalized, but it has a specific position. It's a metropolis, but still in a transitional state, from informal to formal. I mean, many metropolises in the world, I mean, except for the third one, let's say, almost have completed this transformation. So this is in kind of aligned to that. Once we don't have a venue for it, all of a sudden the Biennale becomes also an excuse for the people who are visiting or living in the city to explore new ways of the city, even learn about spaces. Because every time they come up with some other space. I mean, otherwise, let's look at Venice Biennale. We have this beautiful space allocated to Biennales, but then it's dead for the rest of the year. It's kind of dark point, not accessible. But here we don't use that. And whenever it's kind of a pop-up event, and it's another layer to it. I kind of enjoy it. I hope there is no venue for Biennale. In the light of this, I mean, I would say, I would ask to you to consider this being from informal to formal, because that's a good epoch for a lot of creativity. I mean, think of New York. Now it has completed. After Giuliani, it lost a lot of energies. Before, artists had their own ways of creating their own environments. Now it's not possible anymore. So we are not still there. So in that, and from the light of this, also let's reconsider independence. Is it, what type of independency? Is it an objectively positive thing or not? Is it an adjective? Is it not good or bad independence?
Independence is, of course, a myth, an illusion. Cannot be nothing can be totally independent, but must be also a goal. In a sense, I agree with your idea that we like Istanbul Biennale not having a fixed venue, because for the international visitor create always, why not, an element of surprise. You discover interesting places in town, so not bad. In Venice, this is achieved through the collateral exhibitions which happen here and there, and my association had an early experience in using for the first time space in the Arsenale or in former factories or brewery in other peripheral part of the town. These parts were looked badly because they were peripheral, not easy to get, but they gave a strong sensation to the visitors. The venue sometimes was ideal. I remember a very unpractical to get place, a former brewery on Giudecca Island, in which Mike Nelson did perhaps his most big and complex installation, which I was collaborating to as a local manager. It has been an important work for his career. In the middle of nowhere, people complaining, is it not well signed? And of course, it was not well signed because the budget was gone in the production and so on. So that is an element of freshness for Istanbul Biennale. If you don't mind, I didn't ask my colleague permission, but seeing some person in the floor, I would like to ask a question, and maybe one of you can answer to them. For instance, Murat Ozelmas, you, beside your own profession, have been an art manager in a sense. You helped also me and others in creating projects with artists in a complex town. How do you see, or do you have something to say in these arguments? Of course, you have 5 minutes.
As looking for the recent years, Istanbul was really a big, magnificent place for all around of the world. Artists would like to be invited to Istanbul for an exhibition. With Beral Madra and with you, we made lots of exhibitions, whole settlements. I was working with Japanese for Japanese exhibitions, and by the time for the last 3 years, everything started to vanish for me. My invitations for other exhibitions were, I got replies they are really very paranoid. They get very afraid to be here for reasons. And now, I think the art scene is very concentrated in Istanbul. And I don't know, the government doesn't supply any support. Also, they want to disappear this scene. Today I take a long walk on the Istiklal Street, and it was really what the Turkish government looked like. It's all patched and it seems very ugly. So things need to be changed. I don't know how to change people's mind about this Middle East country, but I feel like I cannot feed myself for intellectual things anymore. There are no more musical concerts. Everything is very repressed.
Restricted.
Yes, restricted, you may say. So I think we can find an answer, or how to restart, or what will happen if we don't start these things again in Istanbul.
Thank you. Maybe Mehmet, the position of an art manager, which is not a curator and not an artist, can be compared to that of an artist, in a sense, more, let me say, honest, clear goal. You have to do that thing, which has, of course, a delicate cultural value. But there is somebody commissioning and the artist to work with.
Yeah. But there is an irony here about the change of the current situation in Turkey and Istanbul. People tend to think that things are changing in a bad way. But I think the thing is, we are more astonished that things are not changing politically, because we have been like this for, I don't know, a century, maybe more. And for once we thought, oh, maybe things are changing, but no, it's not changing. It's the same thing. That's the, let's say, the big problem that people, that's very discomforting.
Yeah, may I add something more? You know, as the more restriction must bring more creativity. I mean, what we looked in the 70s culture, the music, the arts were all developed by the wars, by the stressed people. But today everything is, maybe people are not normal, they are not normal people. I mean, we are all collapsed by many things with useless technology. We do not use the social web as we have to use it. We don't, maybe that's for me myself, but I don't know how to use the right way. I cannot bring anything up, yeah, something like that. I cannot see no creation. We have all the positions to make, like, we have to create more music, but I cannot see no more creation around this art scene.
Thank you. I also would like to ask architect Altendesh, which is managing a company called Madra. And years ago you opened a space for exhibitions in Galata, no? And I consider it not an artist-run initiative, but a free space, because I don't think you have your own dark cultural agenda behind, so probably you have shown artists which you liked or were introduced to you by curators. How do you see the position of what you have done in this town according to the discussion today?
It was a really very private initiative of myself, of our company. We just the time, as we began with our company Madra, the first thing we thought to the artists, to invite the artists for our spaces and to make something with artists. It was an atmosphere, the atmosphere of beginning of new ideas, and I think we enjoyed it very much, and in all our flats we offered as a holiday apartments, were invited artists to make their own works, and it was really very, very good, and everybody enjoyed it. And then I thought, only with heart and with willing of making something, it happens. I think the time in which we are now, we have to do such a things more and more. I think we have to, we should not think the time is past to do such a thing. The time is now to do such a things. And the people who are together for these things to do, the initiative and arts, they should come more and more together like now in a Biennial and make them more and more strong together, not give up anything. And I think it's really possible in such a city like this. Okay, we are not so active like last years, but we are still active, and this is a very good thing. And we are doing architecture and we are doing arts, and so the things should happen. This is the most important, what I think.
Of course. Yes.
Yes. Let us consider that Istiklal Street, Beyoğlu, now we focused on this area. First of all, this city has 39 districts. So we are talking about 3 districts: Beyoğlu, Şişli, and Beşiktaş. So where the contemporary art or all kind of creative industries is concentrated in these 3 districts. And we have been expecting that Kadıköy side would take also this kind of function during these developments since, let's say, 5 years. But, for example, Yel Değirmeni was a new venue for, a new hope for many artists because of its architectural interest in architectural structure, which was an Armenian district at during its development. So, what is crucial is that Beyoğlu had, I think, 1, 2, 3, 4 transformations, actually, 4 changes, but not so as a social initiative, but coming from the state, it was a forced change. For example, from the Ottoman period to the Republic image. And from the Republic image, we know that in 1956 it was clean of minorities, so it was a very tragic, dramatic transformation. And now we have come to intellectual transformation, which is dangerous. But your library gave great hope. Suddenly it was opened in the middle of this depression, and I would like to say thank you. And behind that there is a big bank, so it's So something is going on. I mean, there is a clash. Now this clash is very visible.
But the thing is, I mean, the thing with this city and architecture is sometimes very puzzling. It even puzzles me. For example, we tend to think Beyoğlu is probably the singular district in Turkey now, remaining from the beginning of 20th century. We don't find, as a bulk of city, we don't have any other second place in Turkey like this. All demolished. And that's why once the space is there, whatever the transformation is going through, it will revive again. Because spaces transgress, let's say, transcend whatever the content is coming. Even what creates the spaces sometimes, I mean, that's very painful to admit, but some crime, for example, the crime of cleaning of the minorities. And probably Beyoğlu that's the reason why Beyoğlu survived. Because then all of a sudden many buildings, they did not have any owners. But only what you can do, you could just occupy it. But as you are not the owner of it...
But probably you don't remember how it looked afterwards. It was quite empty for many years, because I was at that time going to the German school in Tuner, and I remember how depressive this area was.
Empty, but the space is there.
Yeah.
Probably preserved because of that crime. Otherwise, it would be transformed 2 or 3 times probably.
So is it good that in my life I see twice a section of the city transforming from a very lively, energetic position into a depressive position? So 2 days ago I came out of from Karaköy to Tuner, because I was not in the city since 3 months, and suddenly I saw the big ditch in front of Ayse Erkmen's installation. The ditch was so big, it was like a metaphor for me. Okay, ask questions.
Yes, I also would like to ask an artist which surely has experience in the struggle for survival, Eda Gecikmez. Can you say something about how to survive?
Because he came from Beirut.
Maybe there are strategies which to get a rich husband, for instance. Not bad, not for freedom, of course.
Okay, Vittorio, thank you. Actually, I have many things in my mind after these conversations.
Sure.
And many questions appears, and I was, if I can say, okay, let's start. My first big surprise that the architect talking about art and artist, and instead of architecture or architect, and maybe I can talk also architecture or architect, that I fascinated in this era, because I think time has changed, and we are in post-truth era now, in climate change or Anthropocene. So I think should think about institutions not the same way. There should be another solutions, and there are actually, I don't know which artists you follow, but there are many artists in the world that they are working for justice and hope, and which is my fascination was about during last year about forensic architecture, and they are working also with many artists just for this aim. So I don't know, my perspective of art is now more about digging not just archive or documentary, but also working, like commenting or transforming it something like a communication, about communication with people. I don't know. So this is one of my comments. And the second one, if we think about, especially in Istanbul, there are many artists, especially women artists, they don't have initiative, they don't have official name, initiative name, because initiative, when you put a name, you became famous, and you know, these artist initiatives, if we consider them as an artist, now they are all well published. And okay, initiatives not exist anymore, but the artists, they are.
They do exist.
Yes. So now this is a strategy now inside the artists doing their own exhibitions without putting any initiative name. So this is kind of a strategy. And recently, for example, last year, there were many exhibitions, especially women artists, they made it. So I don't know, these focuses are very important and we shouldn't miss. And okay, I talked too much.
Thank you for this. I wanted to give a free talk to the floor, but also I would like to ask a very respected colleague, Erek, in your vast international career, what you would suggest to artists from countries less gifted in terms of public health, like Britain, I would say Mediterranean countries like Italy and Turkey, in terms of survival?
Thank you. I'm not sure I can answer that question easily. I was going to make some comments though, and I've really enjoyed the interventions by the four of you and from the floor. I might sort of come to it indirectly in a moment, if I may. But the first thing I'd like to say is really about the question, should the Biennale have, the Istanbul Biennale have premises or anything. I had considerable experience with Biennales as one of the founders of Manifesto, and as you probably know, that moves from one city to another. I think you can debate for a long time whether you should have a base, but what is absolutely indisputable and isn't addressed by Biennales on the whole is the need for continuity of administration. It's very boring, and preservation of memory, archive and so on. And I would enter the strongest plea to those who, at Icona, whoever it is, who fund the Istanbul Biennale, that they should invest in the proper continuity program. Manifesto changed the city every 2 years, it still does. You get a lot of money, you get 4 or 5 million euros. When it's all over, you're left with sort of one person and a dog, more or less. The archive, there's no money for showing the archive, there's no way of preserving and working on the memory, because you can only move forward by looking back in many cases. Now coming to your question a little bit. And I like the comments about intervention in public space very much. We in Britain, the Liverpool Biennale have worked very closely on this question of public space, and recently the Folkestone Triennale, which opened. And that has a lot to do with urban regeneration. Of course, after a time, you may run out of places to regenerate. And there is a danger in that, and that is, of course, that artists gentrify or help the process of gentrification. Then, of course, the rents go up, they have to move out. Folkestone is finding a sort of answer in making sure that everything is permanent or temporary. They have 20 or 30 long-term commissions, but those will go and they'll be replaced by other things. And so permanent change, I think, is also important within a city that's dynamic and changing. But I'd like to go now to come to your question. I think we can't solve all the problems everywhere all the time. And I think that most of us in this room, as far as I can gather from the atmosphere, really want to be and should be close to the artist and to the artist's initiatives. Once the artist has made a certain reputation, however it's made, then they survive or they don't survive. And Vittorio, not all artists who show in Biennales are made for life. They're probably made for 2.5 months or for 5 years, and then they have struggled to exist. I think the really important thing is to help these sort of artist initiatives, self-help initiatives such as Ayse was referring to, and just to stay as close as you can to what artists are thinking about and doing. And in that sense, there was a reference to food. I think the slow food principle is a very, very good one. The trouble is that a young artist is brought up, if you go to the Royal College of Art in London, they sell from their degree show, they sell work for £5,000, £10,000. There's no critical debate or anything. And what's needed is to create an atmosphere, not of criticism, but of what Erek, well-known theorist, calls criticality around the work. So it shouldn't go straight from the artist's studio like Saatchi would buy up all the artist's work, and then the artist was left absolutely high and dry because there's nothing to sell, there's no debate around. But there should be an atmosphere of criticality, and I was going to do, if I may, I wouldn't go on for too long. I wanted to do a little bit of publicity, if I may. I'm involved as the chair of something called the International Awards for Art Criticism, which is now annual, it's in the 4th year, which takes place in Beijing, in Shanghai. And it's a Chinese-British initiative, but it's global, and it's for people from any background writing about reviewing contemporary art exhibitions, 1,500 words. It's judged anonymously by a very good panel, a very prestigious panel of judges each year. The closing date is 24th of September. If anyone is interested for this year, it's still not too late. There's a publication of 20 selected essays. You can write in Chinese, which you may not be able to, or in English. And there's a publication, there's a €10,000 prize, there are 3 supporting prizes. And this is, through doing this, we are trying to stimulate thought and writing, critical writing about contemporary production. So anyone afterwards wants to come and ask me, I can give them information and details. I think that's, well, I could say a lot more, but I won't. But thank you for inviting me. I'm very pleased to be here, and it's a very interesting discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. So there are some important issues raised up, but I want to say something more because the question of artist initiative has come up now also with Eda. I totally agree with you. I mean that it's not all about artist initiatives, which is an independent space, that we can totally discuss what independence means in this sense. I remember in 2009 this discussion about the independent spaces. The general conclusion was, okay, being independent is not the actual situation, but was the desire of the people. You know, we can, and the question was put, okay, independent or alternative to what, and etc. But on the contrary, I also think that an artist initiative does not necessarily become dependent by taking some finance from somebody. That's also another question. But in relation to your comment and to Murat's comment, I also think that there is a lot of art and a lot of production in Istanbul right now. I don't think it's so negative and depressive, and also many women groups are doing a lot of female artists, very active, a lot of people trying to do something as they can, and some of them in fact they do not have to be in the art form. As I say, they can be somewhere in between, like an urban gardening project. So I find it a little bit unfair if when somebody says, Istanbul, there is nothing happening, you know, no culture, no art, no production, for the people that try to do something. And I think there is still a lot of efforts to produce and a lot of artwork, also research. As a historian myself, for example, there are a lot of archives to be waiting to be worked on, you know. Many people coming to Turkey to work the archives, to work on the archives of the Ottoman past and Turkey, because many things are already worked for some other places. So there is only so many materials here at the moment, and some people are doing positive efforts. I don't think depression helps us too much, because it's already depressed, but people are trying their best. So, and I also agree with you, Eda.
Thank you. I think it is time to let people talk if anyone has something to say.
I think if we can clearly define our situation, it will help us to develop better strategies. We have to admit that we are living in a period of counter-revolution. So it's happening, has been happening for a while. But we started to feel the pressure more and more. And different institutions, build up their own strategies. For example, the Biennial and the contemporary Istanbul. So if you look at both of those big events, so they give us the feeling of abundance of art. However, if you carefully look at both of the events, which I am part of one of them, you realize that auto-censorship, or a hidden kind of censorship, is a method to deal with this counter-revolution. And I'm not happy with this strategy. So this by developing so by developing methods, they survive the rising authoritarianship by developing censorship on certain things. So they develop a way of getting along with the power, but is it the right thing for all of us? So I don't think so. So what is the other method? So I don't agree that we don't have arts in the city as well. So I think that Turkish architecture is in a worst situation. So I think it's totally fucked up. So the architects first, they need to look at what they are doing, then they need to look at arts. In terms of arts, the art is gone underground. So if you need to really find what artists are doing, you need to go to hidden caves and things like that. Search the streets. I think Yeldi is a good example. But the reason is ignorance. So ignorance are giving us a good, let's say, planet of freedom. So it's not the banks that will save Beral, because the powerful institutions are also a threat for us. So it's whether the government or the banks or the big institutions or the curators. So when they are powerful, too powerful, they are a danger for us. So we need planets of ignorance. So some artists are trying to hide away. But of course we need to develop new methods. Thank you.
Any other comment? Maybe later our panelists will answer to points that they consider interesting. I thought yes. Please tell who you are.
I'm Tuğçe. I'm just a fourth-year student of Arts and Cultural Management in the University of Bilgi University, basically. I want to ask, you have told something like artist is abusing political and social consciousness, whereas before it was itself a political act. I think those biennials are like super crucial about influencing this interest and focus. They tell, look, this is the theme, and you should produce something related to it. For example, this biennial, which had the theme salt water. When you look at products, they are all dealing with so much about political issues, and they are very kind of maybe superficial because they are not a political act themselves. Maybe they are just using this consciousness, and we are this way. Maybe this is the dependency, and regarding the dependency, maybe it is like the artist should maybe choose its own political matter, which means they can survive in black matter or underground. And it was very interesting you're saying planet of ignorance actually. And this is what I wanted to add, and I want to ask Beral Madra something. That she mentioned something like all those biomes that they have super creators, and they should have something like a local team behind, and this is all leads to like complex partnerships, and we need to control this. Like we need it looks like a challenge, and who will be the decision maker for this design of those partnerships. So these issues are all can be related to policy producing, like policy making, in my opinion, and or cultural policy agenda. And I want to ask, can you evaluate the current situation with the production of cultural policy in terms of cultural survival, like all these issues? Is it really, is it efficient, yani yeterli mi mevcut olan her şey? Thanks.
Maybe anyone else? So, have anything to comment? We wanted to answer that.
So you are asking me all these questions to me? Okay, maybe I start from the last sentence. Yes, this is the main issue, that in Turkey there is a certain culture industry, but it has its own character. I mean, it tries to be like a culture industry or art industry or whatever you call the system, to be like in Germany or in France or in Netherlands, European countries, because it has been always a model for us. I can say the American model was not our model at all, because American model is mainly based on private sector, but our art history is based on state capitalism. So after the 80s economic revolution in Turkey, when Turkey entered in liberal economy, it started to be a hybrid model of state, private sector, and independent initiatives. So there were three infrastructural teams. State was also present, as you well know, until 2009. We had this Atatürk Culture Center where all state artists had their possibility, theater, opera, music, etc. So I can say that until 1985, maybe 86, we had art and culture industry exactly like the Soviet type of art and culture. After that, it became more private sector initiative. But now we have come to a certain division. So there is a kind of state culture and art, but it is a great rupture from what has been developing from the 80s on. And on the other side, the art and culture industry now is, let me use this term, monopolized by private sector. So, is it enough for you to look?
I just want to get whatever I have stimulated from each of you. Thank you.
No, this abuse.
Abuse has to.
She asked because, yes, or you did say. No.
Yeah, no, I used
question
that.
about
Of course, you use this abuse in a very different
Yes.
way. I mean,
Yes.
abusing.
Yes.
arts abuse.
But at the same time, I warned you, I put it very crude and sometimes as vulgar to make certain points. Of course, it's not the case. But there's, I think it is a sign of frustration in the current, on the face of current change in the world, where it's too much disseminated, too fast. Content is created by everybody. Kind of a sign of frustration, I put it like that.
A system, art market, and art market has a sovereignty on the artworks. But of course, there were very crucial political artworks in the contemporary art fair, very intelligently presented. As Genjo says, there is a certain self-censoring in the atmosphere now, because, I mean, this art fair, which is somehow supported by a private sector, which is collaborating with the government, so you can expect that not every artwork can be exhibited in that art fair. So this is another problem of the infrastructure.
Another problem with art fair is, besides the censorship, most people buy art which matches well with their sofas.
Yes.
Who was, I have seen Henry, please.
Just a very quick comment. There's a problem with biennales as well, and that is the problem of spectacularization. An artist will appear with one work in an art fair which the organizers didn't know in advance what it would be because it's produced for the event. And the public, of course, have no idea what the hinterland of that artist is, and it's here today, gone tomorrow. And I think that's also a severe risk in the sense that things pop up artists sometimes.
My friends, I think it is time to conclude the discussion, but maybe we have 10 more minutes if someone wanted to articulate new ideas. I am a bit confused because we talked vast different issues, and starting from the critical point, cultural independency, resources to allow artists to make more or less, again, independent creation, and the presentation of art that is not only spectacular. Surely there are, probably the stronger point are the smaller ones, like artist-led initiatives, and to me is always dear, so very few listen this, an international agreement on fair dealings in the art world, percentage paid to the artist, right of resale, and so on. These in few countries exist, and if I ever to think to Italy, I didn't ask my friends, but I'm sure it's the same in Turkey. Usually artists try to sell directly to the collector. The collector only wanted to get a reduced price. So the gallery, which maybe does or try to do an honest work in defending the artist, prepare exhibitions, publish catalogs, of course is undermined by these unfair dealings. But museums, of course, in Italy are very conservative, beside a few new contemporary art museums that, because of their title, are forced to show contemporary art. But usually it is a long journey for an artist to get to the museum. Even something simple like a project room, the lesser room in the museum is very hard to be seen, to be given to artists or young curators. So I think there are more problems than solutions. I naively hoped that we could find a recipe together, but there is no such a thing. But probably talking about recipes, you know, food can be cooked in many different ways, and so also culture. Archive, presentation, memories, books, discussions, criticism, which is hardly in Italy seen as such. I mean, art critics don't critic. They talk about art, they put some lines by Heidegger, and that is that. But perhaps you have something to say.
I only wanted to ask Mehmet Kütükçüoglu about the works, about the really very hard works for the architecture or for architects. What I think you should give an answer about it.
No, I mean, I don't want to end this. The only thing is I'm not a representative of architects fraternity here. So I think it's not discussable. What you said, there's no discussion. So, I mean, I don't want to end this.
No, okay. We have to find a common plateau, which means everybody of us, I am sure, is interested in culture and think that this is a precious asset for any society. I like very much something you, Ayse, quickly commented, the danger of reduced public space and public life. This is usually overlooked because everybody has his own house, his friends, you go to work, you use public transport, no? But this is not enough. I make you an example. In Venice we had the central post office in the Fondaco dei Tedeschi. The Fondaco was a building like a han in which commercial activities were held belonging to the same nation. You know, we had also the Fondaco dei Turchi. And merchants lived only when they were visiting for their business. It's like a caravanserai, Venice style. Lived there and that had their goods and their deeds done in the down floor. So the Fondaco dei Tedeschi, since 100 years, became the central mail office. And recently, the Italian mail office, this has to say something. But nice. Ce la com'è. And recently they reduced it because it was a massive building and no enough that I don't eat it. I don't want to eat it. And they reduced the size and it's been sold. Pay maybe a coffee twice than in normal cafes around the corner. So that is something most of people are not aware. There has been only an elite protesting about this transformation and the loss of public space. But normal people, let me say, okay, let's thought now we have to go somewhere else to find a crammed, uglier mail office. Is that? Maybe Billur, you wanted to say something,
Yes.
and thank you for having the ideas of this panel and to call me to help you.
Thank you. Yes, I would like to say the thank you notes. We would like to thank our audience for being with us for this special event. We would like to thank Ms. Erek, the director of the Biennial and the IKSV team for giving us the opportunity to take part in the neighboring events of the Biennial. We would like to thank our panelists, Ms. Ayse, Erek, Beral, Madra, and Mehmet Kütükçüoglu for their valuable presence and contribution to this project. We would like to thank, of course, Nuova Icona for their cooperation and Vittorio Urbani for his contribution as a co-curator and a moderator. And we would like to thank Mr. Osman Kavala and the Cezayir team for their kind hospitality and their valuable support for our project. This meant so much to us because this is where also we did our Open Dialogue Istanbul Solpitodes conference during the 14th Istanbul Biennale. I would also like to invite you to our conference tomorrow, Cultural Heritage and Neighborhood, that will be realized in Akbank Sanat between 11 and 1 o'clock. Thank you.